Chapter 2 Secrets in the Snow. Adara smiles were secrets to her, and she spent them only in winter. She could hardly wait for her birthday to come, and with it was cold. For in winter, she was a special child. She had noticed since she was very little, playing with the others in the snow. The cold had never bothered her the way that did Jeff and Terry and her friends. Often Adara stayed outside alone in this for hours after the others had fled in search of warmth, or run off to old Lars to eat the hot vegetable soup she liked to make for the children. Adara would find a secret place in the far corners of the fields, a different place each winter, and there she would build a tall, white castle, patting the snow in place with her small bare hands, shaping it into towers and battlements like those Hal often talked about on the king's castle in the city. She would snap icicles off the lower branches of the trees and use them for spires and spikes and guard posts, ranging them all about her castle. And often in the dead of winter would come a brief thaw and a sudden freeze, and overnight her snow castle would turn to ice, as hard and strong as she imagined real castles to be. All through winters, she would build on her castle and no one ever knew. But always the spring would come and a thaw not followed by a freeze. Then all the ramparts and the walls would melt away, and Adara would begin to count the days until her birthday came again. Her winter castles were seldom empty. At the first frost of each year, the ice lizards would come wriggling out of their burrows, and the fields would be overrun with the tiny blue creatures darting this way and that, hardly seeming to touch the snow as they skimmed across it. All the children played with the ice lizards, but the others were clumsy and cruel, and they would snap fragile little animals in two, breaking them between their fingers as they might break an icicle hanging from a roof. Even Jeff, who was too kind ever to do something like that, sometimes grew curious and held the lizards too long in his efforts to examine them, and the heat from his hands would finally make them melt and burn and finally die. Adara's hands were cool and gentle, and she could not hold the lizards as long as she liked without harming them, which always made Jeff pout and ask angry questions. Sometimes she would lie in the cold, damp snow and let the lizards crawl over her, delighting in the light touch of their feet as they skittered across her face. Sometimes she would wear ice lizards hidden in her hair as they went about her chores, though she took care never to take them inside and where the heat of the fires would kill them. Always she would gather up scraps after the family ate and bring them to the secret place where her castle was a building, and there she would scatter them. So the castles she erected were full of kings and courtiers every winter, small furry creatures that snuck out from the woods, winter birds with pale white plumage, and hundreds of squirming, struggling ice lizards, cold and quick and fat. Adara liked the ice lizards better than any of the pets she family kept over the years, but it was the ice dragon that she loved. She did not know it when she had first seen it. It seemed to her that it had always been a part of her life, a vision glimpsed during deep of winter, sweeping across the frigid sky on wings serene and blue. Ice dragons were rare even in those days, and whenever it was seen, the children would all point and wonder, while the old folks muttered and shook their heads. It was a sign of a long and bitter winter when ice dragons were abroad in the land. An ice dragon had been seen flying across the face of the moon on the night Adara had been born. people said, and each winter since it had been seen again. And those winters have been very bad indeed. The spring coming later each year. So the people would set fires and pray and hope to keep the ice dragon away, and Adara would fill with fear. But it never worked. Every year the ice dragon returned. Adara knew it came for her. The ice dragon was large, half again the size of the scaled green war dragons that Hal and his fellows flew. Adara had heard legends of wild dragons larger than the mountains, but she had never seen any. Hal's dragon was big enough, to be sure, 5 times the size of a horse, but it was small compared to the ice dragon, and ugly besides. The ice dragon was crystalline white, that shade of white that is so hard and cold that it is almost blue. It was covered with hoarfrost, so when it moved, its skin broke and crackled as the crust in the snow crackles beneath a man's boots, and flakes of rime fell off. Its eyes were clear and deep and icy. Its wings were vast and bat-like, colored all a faint translucent blue. Adara could see the clouds through them, and oftentimes the moon and the stars, when the beast wheeled in frozen circles through the skies. Its teeth were icicles, a triple row of them, jagged spears of unequal length, white against its deep blue maw. When the ice dragon beat its wings, the cold winds blew and the snow swirled and scurried, and the world seemed to shrink and shiver. Sometimes when a door flew open in the cold of winter, driven by a sudden gust of wind, the householder would run to it, bolt it, and say, "An ice dragon flies nearby." And when the ice dragon opened its great mouth and exhaled, it was not fire that came streaming out, the burning sulphurous stink of lesser dragons. The ice dragon breathed cold. Ice formed when it breathed. Warmth fled. Fires guttered and went out, shriven by the chill. Trees froze to their slow, secret souls, and their limbs turned brittle and cracked from their own weight. Animals turned blue and whimpered and died, their eyes bulging and their skin covered over with frost. The ice dragon breathed death into the world, death and quiet and cold. But Adara was not afraid. She was a winter child, and the ice dragon was her secret. She had seen it in the sky 1,000 times. When she was 4, she saw it on the ground. When she was out building her snow castle, and it came and landed close to her, in the emptiness of the snow-covered fields. All the ice lizards ran away. Adara simply stood. The ice dragon looked at her for 10 long heartbeats before it took off to the air again. The wind shrieked around her and through her as it beat its wings to rise. But Adara felt strangely exalted. Later that winter it returned, and Adara touched it. Its skin was very cold. She took off her glove nonetheless. It would not be right otherwise. She was half afraid it would burn and melt at her touch, but it did not. It was much more sensitive to heat than even ice lizards. Adara somehow knew. But she was special, the winter child. Cool. She stroked it and finally gave its wing a kiss that hurt her lips. That was the year of her 4th birthday. The year she touched the ice dragon.